Thank you, Hunter, as always, for that fabulous introduction. Absolutely love working with you too, Boo Boo. All right, so as we go and dive into today's session, I just wanted to give y'all a little bit of backstory on Candice here. Very, very, very impressive person. So Candice joined the Public Welfare Foundation in Washington, D.C. as its president and CEO in 2017. Now, prior to that, she had served as senior advisor at Chicago CRED, C-R-E-D, which is an organization that focuses on gun violence in Chicago. In that role, she helped secure greater investments for violence intervention programs as an alternative to the criminal justice system. So probably something a lot of y'all in the audience are very much in favor of. Now, prior to her work with CRED, Candice served as director of the Illinois Department of Juvenile Services. This was a cabinet level state agency where she supervised operations, programming, budget matters, and communications. Now, during her tenure, she pushed significant reforms that helped reduce the number of youth in state custody. Earlier even than that, Candice served as a program officer with the MacArthur Foundation, where she managed a grant portfolio that was focused on decreasing racial and ethnic disparities in the juvenile justice system and on improving the quality of defense for indigent youth. She's also served on the board of Cabrini Legal Aid, which is a Chicago-based civil legal service organization. And as if all of that were not impressive enough, Candice also received her JD from New York University School of Law and her bachelor's from Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. Candice, I mean, I was like wickedly impressed 2 sentences into that intro. But is there anything else that you think our audience should know about you before we dive in?
What should they know? I have a really cute little dog.
What's the dog's name?
Cinnamon.
Oh, Cinnamon.
She's new, and can I be honest? So she's cinnamon color. So I love when I call the vet and they're like, "What color is she?" I'm like, "Well, cinnamon." But I don't get credit for that. I wasn't even witty enough to come up with it. So in addition to all that stuff, I'm just a real person. I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm a human.
I love it. Thank you, Candice. All right, so let's dive in a little bit more. What can you tell us about your work? Obviously, there's an overarching theme to a lot of the places that you have worked, but what do you want us to see about it or take away from it?
I've done throughout my career in different roles in different organizations, all towards this work of justice reform. Just this notion that I want Black and Brown people to really be born free, hopefully sometime in my lifetime, but probably in a future lifetime. Our organization, the Public Welfare Foundation, gives grants to organizations all over the country that focus on that work, both for the adult criminal justice system and the youth justice system. And we have the esteemed privilege of supporting some incredible change makers and leaders, and it's inspiring.
Oh God, yes. I mean, this is all absolutely fascinating, and I think that I have a very small background in law. I went to a year of law school and was a paralegal for like 5 years.
I love that.
Well, but I think this is one of those things that if you are not or have never been involved in the criminal justice system, I don't think most people understand how close a lot of us are to that interaction, right? You're only like 2 to 3 really bad choices away, and they might not even be bad choices that you were able to make for yourself. So exactly right. I do think that, this area is especially important because one of the things we talk about when we talk about DEIB is diversity of background, and these experiences, they change people and they shape people really. And so, it is important to not just overlook the population of people who have been involved with the criminal justice system, especially when it comes to youth. Like,
Meg, are you my long lost sister cousin? I love this. I love this. I agree. I think that that's exactly right. Both because you frame so eloquently that many of us throughout our life, I mean, think back to your own adolescence. There were things that I did as a child that some law says was wrong and I should have been held accountable for it. But I was able to either get through it, to talk myself out of it, to do what I needed to do to have this trajectory that landed me here today. And so many folks that get caught up in the criminal justice system disparately come from a small set of communities in this country. And then we do this thing that is uniquely American, which is lock them out of healthy, happy lives for the rest of their lives. We don't honor redemption and restoration. And so you're exactly right. We both need to think about how we have constructed a system that ensnares probably way too many, but then the choices we make when people are coming back to allow them to make different choices moving through the rest of their lives.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like one of the great American ideals is out of sight, out of mind. And that's one of my favorite sayings is prisons do not disappear social problems, they disappear people.
That's exactly.
So yeah. Okay. So obviously you have spent a large portion of your life in service to others.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, obviously the subject of today's talk is to put your oxygen mask on first. So let's talk about, a time in your life, or the first time I should say, when you knew that you needed to concentrate on your own wellness. I feel like people that are involved in service work like this, it's very, very easy to let yourself get burnt out in furtherance of the cause. So how did you handle this the first time that this was an issue for you?
Poorly. This is why I love this conversation, because I feel like, I'm being honest about it. And I think we hold these sort of like strong binaries, which is like, if you're good on wellness, you're a yoga guru out sitting somewhere with a beautiful sunset, and the truth is that, I think really getting to wellness is not sort of like achieving perfection. It's getting more comfortable with imperfection. The first time I really sort of like was cognizant of burnout was as when you were outlining, I ran a youth prison system. I ran the Department of Juvenile Justice in the state of Illinois. It was a prison system. And not only had I, as a person who never worked in a paramilitaristic system, been tasked to run it, we were running it through an incredible period of reform. I had an incredible leadership team, but everybody was cranking and I was losing weight. I was losing patches of my hair. I wasn't well. And I sort of felt like I was trying to leave, leave blood on the dance floor, leave it all in for the freedom. But there was a point that it became really clear to me that it wasn't sustainable, that there was going to be a period where we hit diminished returns. And not only was I doing that to myself, I was modeling it as a leader to this incredible team. And I think it was an important lesson of being like, okay, there's got to be a way, particularly when you're doing lifetime work. I'm not going to flick a switch in this lifetime and then all of justice reform is going to be done, because we so entrench these notions of what we consider just in this country that are perverse. So it's lifetime work for people who are doing it. So we have to make some choices about how to sustain ourselves. And so after that assignment, because I think of work, it was like periods of assignment. After that assignment, it was really time for me to be like, okay, I need to work on my mental health. Like I need to work on my behavioral health. And I got really intentional about that. Like it was a valuable lesson that I took through the rest of my life.
Did you have to come to a crisis point, or was it just like, do you think you caught it in time so that you weren't necessarily having to like pick up a lot of pieces or rebuild parts of yourself?
That's a good question. I don't think it came to a crisis point. I think because it's like this, it wasn't like one of those movie moments where all of a sudden you knew existentially you had hit rock bottom. But the funny thing about it is that I don't know if we really have that in real life. I think it's just like a sustained period of like, this is not okay. I was doing that job. I would leave my house because we had facilities all over the state of Illinois. I would leave my house in Chicago, sometimes at 5 o'clock in the morning, because I'm trying to get to some place for 9 a.m. that's 3 or 4 hours away. So I'd leave there, go somewhere else and work all day, realize at 7 o'clock at night, I'm not coming back to Chicago that night. I'm staying in a hotel or something. And I haven't figured out what to do with my dog, which is in that house in Chicago. And then in this terror, I have to call somebody. But my mind was so detached from those things of just do I have groceries? Is my dog well and fed? All these human things. And it took a lot of other people to fill those gaps. And so it's sort of there wasn't a crisis point, a point where I hit a nervous breakdown, but there was definitely just this is not healthy. And I think it helped because I had made other life choices. I didn't have children, so I wasn't I wasn't showing up for the kids' school, or they were suffering as a result of my choices. But it was enough that it was sort of this is not sustainable. And I definitely believe I would have been able to do that job longer and enact more change had I just made a set of different choices. Had I just said, you know what, these are stressful jobs, these moments of change jobs. If I have a good behavioral health partner, constant places where I can go, where I can talk, where I can be in conversation and work with someone about how I'm doing and what I'm doing to protect that, I probably would have been able to do that job much longer. And I think about the ability to sustain the work and the change you're trying to be a part of as more of the signal of whether or not you're succeeding than like a crisis point. I could have done a thing longer had I taken better care of myself in that moment.
And I want to highlight something you said early on in that answer, which is like, this is lifetime work. This is not, you hear a lot of people talking about like, well, it's not a marathon, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yeah.
And like, I appreciate that sentence, but I also think you're right. Like there are large aspects to many of these big problems that will not be solved in our lifetime. Now, will they be solved faster because of the work we're doing? Hopefully, yeah. But I think that's really, I really like that idea of looking at it as lifetime work, because that does, it sets your brain in a different planning space, right? In a different like sense of urgency, all that kind of thing.
Yeah. And to your point, you hit it on the head. You can hold the nuance of being a part of a mission that's sort of urgent and necessary, but the gravity of a problem that is so huge that you have to be realistic about what you can accomplish at the same time. Like we as humans can hold that nuance. And I always like to look at it. It's like, I'm not going to win the game. I'm just going to gain a bunch of yards in this lifetime so that the next team, they just don't have to run the full court. Like I'll already have them, you know, I'll have gained some yards for them. Like, I think that's our responsibility. And so you have some urgency about the part of that water you're supposed to carry, but you don't end up believing you got to hold up the whole sky.
Yeah, very, very important distinction. All right. So one of the things you said you learned from, you know, from this, this pile up of things in your life, you said, you know, that you needed a team or needed people with you to kind of meet those needs, right? So I know one of the ways that you accomplished this was through therapy. And the second was learning that you needed a period of quiet after completing a big assignment. Could you talk us through these two learnings? Because it sounds like both, you know, it makes sense, right? Like being quiet, kind of centering yourself, figuring out like, you know, letting the dust settle versus like talking it out with an impartial third party, you know, as I picture therapy. But what did this look like for you?
I think after a big assignment, it's really healthy if you can. And I recognize that there's some, you got to be in a place, you got to have enough privilege to be able to say, I can afford to take some time. But when I left both two assignments, I was a White House fellow earlier in my career. I left and took a period of time off. When I left the Department of Juvenile Justice, I took a period of time off. And I love that one because every mentor I'd ever had, every person who loved me was like, don't do that. It's a high profile role. You can't leave that job without announcing something. People are going to be looking at you. They're going to be asking questions. And I was just like, that's great counsel. I'm going to ignore it. And so, you know, that's another piece of advice I offer to people just in your own wellness. Solicit thoughts and ideas from people you care about, but make a decision that is yours, because you're the only one that has to be responsible for your life and your trajectory. But I needed a period to come back to myself. I wasn't going to decide what was the best next assignment because I was still so frenzied, still so dialed up from what I had been doing, especially because I hadn't been taking the space and time to take care of myself in that role. And I just sort of said, I'm not gonna announce that I'm doing anything. And I wouldn't even talk to people because, you know, as soon as you leave, people start calling you like, what are you gonna do next? Do you wanna come here? Do you wanna move here? What do you wanna do? And I was like, I'm not even gonna take calls from people for a period of time. And for months, I just sort of, you know, I gardened, I went on trips, I traveled, I went to places, I visited my family, people that I hadn't spent time with in years because I had, you know, been so very much like, I'm in a change moment, I've got to deal with this assignment. And I really allowed myself in that moment to come back to myself. And it helped. Like it also helped as a foundation for my own wellness and mental health, because you learn in those moments, particularly when you are reflected back to yourself from people who love you, who you haven't been spending time with. You see ways that you change that you like, and you see, you know, ways that you change that you don't. And you get the option to decide where you're going to go from there. So it really was great. And I really encourage people to think about that. We have such a culture of strive, right? We're socialized in every moment to just like keep grabbing at brass rings. Okay, you did this amazing thing. Now you have to do something else. You got this. Now you have to do the next thing. And it can be antithetical to like happiness and wellness because you never stop and just sort of say, I'm going to take stock. I'm going to be grateful and sort of just spend some time thinking about what I've done to date and how I feel about that. Like it can be really working against the very thing that you need to be focused on to move forward in a way that's going to support you.
Oh my gosh, I'm loving all of this. It's very much reminding me of long story. I was reading this book, and one of the things they were talking about was how there was a certain group of warriors that used to practice like basically like breathing techniques and meditation, but there was a way that they did it on the battlefield, so that as you left like one little like altercation skirmish, I'm not a military historian, I don't know. But as you left the one and went to the other, it was like, okay, master yourself. Don't be like in like the, kind of panic. We have to do everything all at once mode. And like how to keep doing that through a large battle. So it wasn't just like one of these little altercations you're going to face. And that really reminds me of what you're talking about, because you do want to take time, let the dust settle a bit, figure out what was good for that, like good about that for you. But then also like, okay, what am I taking from this? Like, what do I need to carry forward? How does this change what I thought my plans were? I like this.
But it's a metaphor for the same conversation we're having about seeing change work as lifetime work, right? Because part of what you're saying on the battlefield is sort of in the stretch of a long battle. And if you look at change work as a long battle, right? I think we would agree, then you're finding moments in that battle to be like, I got to stop and center myself, drop right back down into my body, because the choices I make moving forward are going to be more clear, more organized, more effective, because I've taken this moment and sort of come back to myself. Because you do, when you're in a big change moment, when you're in a big sort of stressful role, there's a lot of adrenaline. Right? You're running. It's sort of like mimicking at scale this thing that you're doing in battle. You actually aren't always in each moment, just like in a battle, or sort of that analogy, in your clearest state of mind. And that moment of quiet can sort of force you to come back and just center and say, okay, how we doing? How we doing in the trajectory? I've done this thing. I've contributed this to this work in this lifetime period. What's the next thing I feel like I need to be able to contribute if I'm going to keep being the most effective, change maker, leader, supporter, soldier in that instance?
It also forces you to really recognize your achievements too, because I feel like there's a lot of how we're socialized about success and about accomplishments in this life, at least America centric, is a lot about go, 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 go. And it's not necessarily like you reach that rung that you were striving for, and it's not like a rest to like, oh my God, I got here. This is great. I like that.
Or even, do I want to be here?
Oh yeah. Am I at the right spot on the ladder?
Like, I got here and I spent so much time working for this spot. Is this what I thought I was going to be? Which is what I think a lot of people sort of spent the last couple of years in the pandemic being like, oh, do I even want to be here?
Oh yes. Okay, so we've talked about some of the the ways that you've been supporting your mental and physical health and wellness here. But one of the things that I think is common for a lot of people, especially if you've been in this journey for more than a couple of years, is that sometimes like the tools that you develop at one point no longer really serve you, or they don't work for you in the same way. So you have described wellness as a continuum in this way. Could you expand a little bit on that for us?
Yeah, I think what I wanted to just free myself of, it sort of goes back to this, like, wellness is all about being like a guru, standing in front of the sunset. And it's sort of like, it's about really being intentional about what wellness is for you. And the truth is, because as humans, we're constantly evolving and changing. You got to know that's going to be changing in the same way. And so allowing yourself to constantly check in and be like, is this working for me like it used to work for me? Is this working for me at all? And really being honest about that. It's sort of like, I try to do like what is just a little bit of mindfulness, which is check in with myself and say, when I'm in a moment and I don't like it, like, what about this moment doesn't feel right to me? Like, can I name what's happening there in that dynamic? Because if I can really figure out, then I can address it more effectively, right? I could be like, oh, this is what it is, and I need to work on this. I either need to distance in this way, I either need to name this thing and work through it. And on the flip side of that is when you're in a moment and you're like, oh, I feel great. What about this moment? Do you love? I'm out in nature. I'm surrounded by people I love. We're laughing. We're listening to good music. It's sort of like, what about that thing? Because if you can capture those moments, then you can tell yourself really intentionally, I need to maximize these spaces. I need more of this.
Yes. And I think that's the other thing we have to think about here is that, like you said thinking about wellness and self-care as it applies to you specifically.
Yeah.
You know, my husband, when he has a rough day at work, he comes home and all he wants is a bubble bath.
Yeah.
That is not my happy place. That isn't like sitting in a bath makes me feel like I'm in people soup. But like I want to be outside in the garden, looking like a total weirdo with like my giant hat and my gloves up to here and all of that crap, because I like being in the sun and I like dirt. That is what I enjoy. So, but that's the thing, is like really is realizing that self-care does not have to mean the same thing, right? Self-care does not necessarily mean you go, you know, meditate on your, you know, whatever your mantra is for 3 hours. It doesn't have to look like a spa day. It can be whatever recharges you.
Right, exactly. And even for the same human being, it could be different things. It's like, sometimes I want to be with people. Sometimes I want to just take a little space for me. I want to go to the gym because I want to sweat and get all those endorphins, because there's something for me about that just feels like a light switch. It's like when nothing else will allow my mind to stop working and thinking about work and turning over a problem, something about like putting on the most lowbrow music humanly possible in my headphones really loud and just getting a good sweat, all that stuff falls away. And I'm like, whatever else is coming, we'll be ready for it tomorrow. So it's just like, and sometimes I want to have a spa day, or sometimes I just want to, you know, be outside al fresco dining with my girl, you know, it's like, but you can sort of say what really works for me. And you don't have to feel like there's like a one size fits all answer to that.
Exactly. There's a boxing gym near me that's my favorite place to go, and their whole thing is they play like dirty trap music along with boxing workouts. I'm telling you, there is something about just punching the hell out of something while like I can't think because there's no space. Everything is taken up already. It's great.
And I bet it feels like I was like, I'm not there, but that sounds like it's totally right.
Oh my God. It's the most empowering place I think I've ever been. It's wonderful. Okay, we are getting some questions in from the chat, so I want to address a couple of these. This person had asked, how can setting boundaries and saying no to others help when you're trying to put your own oxygen mask on first?
Yeah.
Let's touch on this.
When there was a woman, she's a mentor of mine now. She is a woman who's impressive in the world. She still has a very big job, but I met her more than a decade ago. And she said to me, which is so funny to me, right? Because there was nothing about the conversation that we had that was about this topic. And she just sort of grabbed my arm. You know, I think we were wrapping up a meeting. She grabs my arm, she pulls me back. Everybody else is filing out. And she said, do you know something? When you learn to say no to people, you will figure out that the rest of your life is a lot easier. And at the time, I have to tell you, Meg, I was like, what you talking about? You know, it's like, what are you talking about? And the sort of like 40 plus me totally gets it. You know, it is hard. It's hard for humans. It's particularly hard for women and people of color. We are socialized to say yes, to serve, to try to make other people happy. But you do it sometimes at the expense of your own happy. And you really have to figure out, actually, I can have boundaries. It's okay for me to be like, that's not serving me. So I'm gonna say no, and you got to figure out whether or not it's serving you, it's okay. And I think it's really important to do that. The interesting thing about it is I think sometimes we're not always better at setting boundaries in our professional life, when boundaries are oftentimes the most powerful in our personal life. But the truth is that you need to be able to establish both, because you just sort of have to say, and this is also about that brass ring, that rung. That's that moment of being like, okay, now I got here, and asking, do I even want to be? Like, it's okay at each point in your life's journey to sort of be a little bit introspective and sort of ask the question. But boundaries are critically important. They will make your life a lot easier, and they actually will facilitate what I think are healthier relationships, where you like, this is what I can give, this is what I want to give, and I'm not going to give anything else because I don't have to.
Yes, this is hugely important. Especially, you know, like you said, like women of people of color, women are very, at least in America, very socialized to be useful, right? Like, what can you do? What are you bringing to the table? What are you doing to help the situation? And so I think that is it's a very powerful like habit or culture kind of to like try and go against there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about some of your wellness tools. What works for you?
I love to exercise, as I've already said. It's really important for me just to have access to that, because I can tell in real time, like, it'll totally elevate my mood. I can have a hard day, go downstairs, we have a gym in our basement, work out, and all of that stuff starts to fall away from me. And I'm like better able to, one, leave here and enjoy the rest of my night, come back and do it again. So I love that. I love being around my friends. We just laugh, and they're a group of people that demand nothing from me in excess, other than that I be present, you know, and I sort of love that, and I need that. And I've had to really get intentional as an adult about protecting time. I leave on Friday for my annual trip with my girls. Now, all these women have big jobs, they have families, they have children. We protect this like week Memorial Day every year for a trip just for us. Can't nobody's husbands or kids go. You know, it's like
Yes.
like, and we go and we spend time together, and I'm so looking forward to that trip, because it's just gonna sort of like wrap and restore me in ways that nothing else can. And I really try to protect space for that, to be around them, to be in the presence of people that restore me. And I think those things are really important. And I try to, I'm also a person that needs, you and I were talking when we were backstage, I need a creative outlet. Like, it's really healthy for me, you know, if it's a little bit of working on a new, like I have all these little projects at home, because the work of transformation, when you do lifetime work, you don't get a lot of immediate benefit from that work. It doesn't feed you in the same way, right? You can't cook an amazing meal in the span of a couple hours, step back and say, oh, this is a thing I did. You know, your work takes years and decades to sort of step back and be like, okay, we really made the progress that we were trying to make. And while that impact is unmatched, it's not giving you nothing in the short term. So having a creative outlets, being able to say, you know, I'm working on, you know, I'm making something creative. I'm working on this little, right now I'm working on this little scarf thing that I love and I'm excited about. And just doing little things like that, I think are really restorative, because they feed you, they give back. And so I try to spend a lot of time, you know, just engaged in arts. I love theater, I love plays, I love live music. And I came up in a household, and I credit this to my mom, where it's like, when you're in the kitchen cooking dinner, put the radio on, turn it up really loud. Everybody's just sort of dancing. And it's such a natural state for us that it has stayed with me. And so sometimes I love the people that live across from my building are probably like, this lady, what is she in there? Because it's like, I know, because it's like they can't hear the music, right? So they're just over there, and I'm in there across from me, they got, you know, rocking out. Yes. And so, you know, it really is healthy just to sort of drop down into yourself and be like, I'm going to enjoy this moment in any way that restores me. So I'm going to play music loud. I'm going to dance around my apartment, my house, whatever it is. Yes. I think those are the ways that I try to sort of like protect the wellness for myself.
Genius. Now, I knew this was going to happen before before we even sat down for this chat. I had no idea how amazing this was going to be. But the whole topic really reminds me of a Red Table Talk that Jada Pinkett Smith had. And this was like at least 7 years ago. Yeah. Like before she had a TV show and all that kind of stuff. But it was about how you can't pour water from an empty cup. And if you are, hers was centered around being a mom, right? And being a caregiver. But it's exactly, I mean, it absolutely exactly applies to this. If you don't have water in your cup, you cannot help water other people. It just, it's not possible.
Right.
Yeah. All right. We are at time. But before we go, is there anything you want our audience to take with them today? If they only remember one thing from this chat, what should it be?
Your wellness journey is your own. And I really believe that wellness, you know, there is no perfect balance in any moment. It's about achieving it over a lifetime. Part of what I think we have to get comfortable with is like, wellness is not the state of perfection. It's getting more comfortable with imperfection. Like, it's okay for you to define it for yourself. So whatever y'all are doing, love it, lean into it, but take some space for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Candice, so much. This has been absolutely wonderful to get to spend this morning with you.
It was a pleasure,
I hope to get to do it again soon.
Yay.